Hi everyone, and welcome to the Eating Well for the Festive Season webinar. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands that we are meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present, emerging, and to Aboriginal people watching this webinar. This webinar will discuss how to make healthy choices in social settings, some tips for healthy swaps, explaining portion sizes, and tips on how to stay healthy at this time of the year. We're very pleased to be joined by our speaker, Ivan Chan, who is an accredited practicing dietitian. Ivan has been with Diabetes Victoria for the past 10 years. He is a Daphne trained dietitian who runs carbohydrate counting workshops for people living with type 1 and for health professionals. Ivan also works at EACH, a community health service in Ferntree Gully, as a community dietitian, where he has been for the past 15 years. A very big thank you to Ivan for joining us today.
So tonight we're going to be looking and sharing some information on eating well for the festive season, or no, we've got Christmas here, but around the corner. But of course, for culturally and linguistically diverse folks, really applies to different festivals that you may be celebrating as well. So you can apply these principles across the board, but we'll be focusing mainly on Christmas tonight. So before we log on to the next slide around the outline, maybe we can talk about some of the objectives that we have tonight and perhaps tie that in also with the individual experiences. So firstly, I think it's useful to establish expectations, reasonable expectations and priorities over the festive season. That through this time, there are quite a number of social functions potentially and associated foods, which can make it harder for people to stay on track and achieve your diabetes goals. And number two, we'll be looking, this is the practical part, to approach food and drink in a balanced manner. And we'll be looking at quality aspects and quantity as well. Certainly in a time where food is more visible, whether it's for eating or for gifts, there's certainly quite a bit more to the forefront, and people may be more prompted to eat and drink more than what they plan. And number three is to really explore ideas of what I call holistic health, and just health, not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and for some people, perhaps spiritually as well. So it's your whole person, looking at also the stress in general that people may encounter either themselves or rubbing off other people who might be under a bit of rush and stress around trying to make deadlines meet. So it could be rushing around, and it could be also challenging times for some people as well through this time. So that leads us to some of the outline for what we're going to cover today. So we talked about expectations, and we'll give some examples, and you can decide what are some reasonable and healthy expectations for yourself to aim for as well. We'll look at some Christmas favorites. We'll cover some healthy choices and swaps. We'll look at some practical tips to avoid overindulging in food and drink, managing portions, look at alcohol and other beverages, and also staying physically and emotionally healthy as well. So those are some of the topics that we'll cover tonight. So coming back to you as a person dialing in tonight, watching in tonight. So what are your individual priorities that you like to achieve? Could they be diabetes related? Could it be more around the symptoms of blood glucose management, whether we're trying to avoid hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, low blood glucose levels and high or above target blood glucose levels? And of course, in audience tonight, we welcome people who live with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, people who live with people living with diabetes and pre-diabetes, general public, and also you could be a health professional, a researcher, and we welcome you all. And so we're looking at managing diabetes-related aspects. It could be symptoms. Could it be body weight? Looking at whether people would gain weight over this festive season. One note to say is I would implore that if you're on a weight reduction goal and you're on a modified eating plan, then I would suggest that perhaps December or the festive season may not be as realistic to look at continuing to lose weight. Maybe maintaining your body weight could be a more realistic goal as well. So that could be something for you to consider, and you can tweak along the way and see how that is going as well. Because we do want it to be realistic and feasible so that you can also enjoy the festive season and not feel that you're missing out. Now, on non-diabetes related goals or priorities, it could be looking at things like spending quality time with others, family, friends, and the like, and also yourself. In this busyness period, sometimes it is so easy to forget to take care of yourself as well. So maybe there might be an element of you pampering yourself or giving yourself some time and space so that you're also recharged for this time of the year and prepare yourself for next year. So looking at healthy expectations around special occasions and diabetes, certainly Christmas Day is one day of the year, one day out of 365 days. If there is an occasional high-fat, high-added sugar meal or two, I believe it can be included as part of a healthy food intake. Certainly, you can also look at portions in moderation, especially if it's more than just the one meal or two. And that's where, and we'll go into where portions could become quite useful. And that can also mean that you don't have to necessarily miss out on some of your favorite foods that don't come around very much during the year. There are certainly no forbidden foods. As a dietitian, we don't tell people, oh, you can't eat this, you can't eat that because you have diabetes, type 1 or 2 for that matter. It's about managing, striking a balance, and again, back to healthy expectations. What is reasonable for yourself? And then you can work toward it, potentially in support with your support network and go from there. But you don't have to miss out. That's something that we are quite encourage people. You don't have to miss out most foods if we can help it. Now, if you have multiple festive functions, I am surrounded by festive functions already. I can count in my head. I think I have about 7 or 8 festive functions in the month of December. So if I have that number, then if I were to blow out every time, then I think it could have quite a cascading effect, quite a bigger effect on my health if I were to let my hair down every time. So certainly in this presentation, some of these tips would be more applicable. We would say if you have more than a few festive functions. So now I'd like to take a poll. So you got to be honest. You have 4 choices and you can only pick one. You may want to pick all 4, but look, only pick one. All right, because I like to. I'm curious what people are like. So what do you enjoy most for Christmas? I'm talking food and drink. So the choices are entrees, mains, desserts, and beverages. Go. I'll count to 10. 1, 2. Someone's raised their hand. If you want to take a poll, just click on there and then we can have a look at the results. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, Jess is gonna show me the screen and see how the polling's gone. Ooh, we've got mains. You could still be polling right now, but I'll just share the results with you. We have 85 people, which 55% of people, the majority, opting for mains tonight. Desserts is a close second, 33%, and then entrees at 9%, and beverages only 3%. Okay, let's work with this. All right. Now, so let's look at some common Australian Christmas foods. I'll cover entrees and mains. Now, look, this is by no means exhaustive, of course. So let's have a look and see what they are. So commonly for salads, people often select potato salad, seafood salad, bean salad, and rice salad. Vegetables tend to be roasted. There are salads as well, but vegetables tend to be roasted. For meats, ham that's either cold or roasted seems to be quite popular, followed by chicken and turkey as well. Seafood is huge. We're talking prawns, fish, prawns, oysters. Now, looking at these 4 broad categories, now, you will probably notice that from a staple or carbohydrate or grains point of view, now rice is there. Potato is kind of in the salad, hiding in the background a little bit by the look of it. Pasta, noodles, and bread seems to be missing. Now, we do acknowledge that people may also have less traditional foods, so you might be consuming some of those other foods that are not on the list, but this is based on some common foods that people identify. So by no means it's exhaustive. So using that list, that's the mains and entrees. So for you folks who pick mains, let's see how well they resonate with you. Desserts, people are also quite interested in desserts being the second rank. So these are common ones. I'll just read them through here, top to bottom, left to right: Christmas cake and pudding, gingerbread shortbread, mince pie, trifle pavlova, yummy. Fruit salad, ice cream, jelly, custard, chocolate are just some of the all-time favorites of people, desserts that people consume over the Christmas period. Now, if we were to look at healthier choices, we can make some healthy choices around the main meals, which includes entree too. Now, probably there's no surprise, but this is our recommended approach. Number one, let vegetables take center stage. So if you were to start your plate with veggies first and then build your plate around that, it's a fantastic start. Number two, we encourage people to choose smaller portions, kind of the entree size of the main meal. So that already helps to reduce the portion size of the non-vegetable items. And finally, where possible, cooking with healthier methods. So I recognize that you could be rocking up to a party and all the foods are provided. That's a little different. Whereas if it's a potless approach or a few other friends are bringing dishes, maybe you can work out some healthier ways to bring some meals there that are healthier so that it's easier for you to manage. For desserts and drinks, we can also make some healthier choices. So let's start with desserts. The common ones: fruit salad, custard, deceivingly healthy. Yogurt is another great one. Now, popcorn and jelly, we'll put them down, but of course, certainly for popcorn, you would need quite an amount for it to add up to a large carbohydrate content. The fat content is really low, as well as salt. That's, of course, before you add any toppings on top for popcorn. Now, for jelly, if it's a small amount of jelly, that's fine. Now, you can certainly do diet jelly as well. That's another option if available. By looking at drinks, these are some of the healthier drinks. No surprise, water's always the best. Tea and coffee always works. A plain mineral and soda water can work as well. Then we have diet cordial and diet soft drinks to round up these choices. So these are my first choices when it comes to desserts and drinks. Now, of course, as we said earlier on, without missing out, they can be great first, second desserts and drinks to start off, and then you can save a smaller corner, if you like, for the richer varieties. So let's head over to practical aspects. So these are some planning tips before you go to the party to avoid overindulging for some of us anyway. So let's start with the first one. If possible, if you are bringing a plate, take a healthy plate. You can fill it with veggie sticks, dips, hummus, tzatziki, salsa, type of things. They can certainly help fill you up with healthier options. Avoid going to a function hungry. There's nothing like ravenous hunger affecting your judgment. So if possible, have a little bite before you go, and chances are you might feel you have a little bit more control over that ravenous hunger that seems to come on when you see those glorious food in front of you. One mindset that perhaps you can take with you is to get back to healthy eating in case you overindulge at the next meal or snack if you've kind of overdone it. Again, if Christmas is a 1 or 2 function event for the whole year, it's probably not as concerning. But if there are multiple functions to attend, then certainly we want to exercise more discretion and care and planning as well. Okay, so more practical tips. Now, this is when you're at the party. Use a smaller plate. A smaller plate can play tricks on your brain favorably, that when your plate is filled, the brain seems to go, it's full. I think I can live with that. And we'll work with that until the plate's finished. And research often shows that people eat less when they use a smaller plate, or even smaller forks and spoons and knives and the like. So you can try that out. Avoid overindulging on premium nibbles. I'm thinking about things like nuts, chips, corn chips, and the like. So before we get to the main course, it's very easy, especially if you're already hungry, that these premium nibblies can get the better of you. We plate with salads and vegetables first, as we mentioned earlier on, and then add small amounts of the meats. So I know that tonight we have a big entourage of Maine's favorites people. So I'd start building the plate with veggies and salads first. Also, when there are other choices, what people can do is take a little bit of everything, but not very much of anything, and that'll also help to satisfy that variety aspect that, again, you don't feel like you're missing out. People may be quite familiar with the plate method. So this is the healthy plate method where if you can divide your plate in half. So let's look at the top half. If you can divide your plate in a half and fill one half with vegetables. So let's start there. For the remaining half, divide in half again, so you get 2/4. Now on the left-hand side, you have the carbohydrate corner. So that's where your rice, pasta, bread, potatoes, and the like can take that place. And then on the right-hand side of the bottom part of the plate, that quarter, you can fill it with your protein-rich options like your meats, fish, chicken, egg, legumes, beans, etc. You can also use things like a clenched fist. So that's pretty much close enough to a metric cup, and that can also fill that quarter plate. So sometimes I take my fist wherever I go and I can put it on my plate, and that can be a quick visual guide to guide me on portions, on the portion aspect. More tips, what to do to avoid overindulging when we're eating. Pick up just one savory food at a time. Again, you're looking at slowing down. You will notice on this slide that slowing down is quite a theme. So picking up one savory food at a time and enjoying it. When there are many choices, as we mentioned, take a little of many things rather than lots of one thing. Now, eating slowly and enjoying the event. I cannot overemphasize this point that when people eat slowly, your senses will bring you to a new level and appreciate the taste of the food to a new level, and let your taste buds have the time and space to enjoy the food. And also, if you're socializing with others as well, use the opportunity to make the most of your time together. See it as a social event, and the food is just one part of it. Still, you can listen to your hunger and fullness cues. Often when people eat slower, it is easier to hear those cues because you're giving your body time and your brain more time to respond to those cues. Now, what about after food? So after the eating, can people still overindulge? Well, some people can. Avoid the temptation of picking at leftovers. So where possible, maybe one thing we can do is to help clear the table when people have finished eating, rather than sitting around. Now, when there's food in front of me, my fingers do a bit of walking toward the plate. So that's something that I can do by putting the food away, so that it can be packed away, perhaps for leftovers, but certainly out of sight, out of reach, and it is less likely for me to eat more than what I need to. Best to not just leave it on the bench, because I can walk to the bench and pick on it too. So another thing you can do is to pack it away and put it away instead. Now you can also pack leftovers, send them home with a guest. You will be a very popular host because you would have solved a lot of their meals post-party. Try that. Now, we can also look at some healthier swaps. So I'm just going to put everything up. There's a sea of options here. So on the left, we have some options to choose, and on the right, there are some options to limit. So I'll just run through them quickly. So rather than chips and corn chips on the first line, pick the oven-baked pita chips and whole grain crackers and nuts. Now, of course, nuts are high in fat, healthy fats nonetheless, but it is also very easy to overdo the amount of nuts, preferably unsalted, to keep the calorie or energy intake within target. Rather than high-fat cheese and fat-rich dips on the right-hand side of the second column or second row, choose instead low-fat yogurt or tomato-based dips like salsa with carrot and celery sticks. And fruit always works best as opposed to other richer types of desserts. Open sandwiches, the fourth one down. It could even be just the one slice, but you can put lots of different toppings on top. Seafood, great time to put on open sandwiches. Now, these are definitely a lot healthier than your deep fried options. Quiches, cabana, certainly high in fat, but also salt, saturated fat in cabana. When it comes to gravy, rather than using the meat fat, it's best to use something that is, it could be something like a Gravox or similar, or you can do a low salt gravy made from scratch as well. Now, here we'll just touch on some healthier cooking tips that you may already be practicing. So just run through these very, very quickly. So roasting your meat on a rack in an oven or under a hood on the grill. Removing the chicken skin and fats of meats before you cook so that the cooking process doesn't transfer the fats from the skin into the meat. Baking vegetables with a light spray or a brush of oil. Unsaturated oils are all fine. Serving meals with lots of fresh salads and vegetables. We find that the vegetable camp is quite lacking when it comes to general festive eating. So by default, it is very easy to then to eat too much of other parts of the meal. Now, we're going to talk about something called diabetic foods. I use this term intentionally in inverted commas because of our language statement as well, but I just want to do a raise hand function. So I'm going to ask a yes, no question. Now, who here today has either received diabetic foods or have been asked by their friends and families whether they would like to have any diabetic foods for Christmas? So I'll give you, if it's a yes, please put up your hand just to give me a sense. I see the numbers rolling in. I see the numbers rolling in. Keep them coming. All right. So this just goes to show that people, friends and family and the like, think that yes, there must be something special about these foods. Now, I believe that their intention is for good, yet they may not be fully aware. So we've got in excess of probably about 15% of our population today who've been approached around the diabetic foods aspect. So let's go through some. Now, what are some diabetic foods, so to speak? So some common examples would be diabetic chocolate or diabetic Christmas cake or diabetic lollies are some common food items that are under this category, amongst others. Those three just pops to mind quickly. So are they any good, really? Well, they don't really offer any special benefit to people living with diabetes, first and foremost. Often they will still affect your blood glucose levels. They contain often just as much fat and kilojoules, calories as the ordinary regular versions. I'm thinking chocolate and carob and the like. They could have a laxative effect, especially if people think, oh, it's safe in inverted commas, and people might overindulge, and some of those foods may send you to the loo quite quickly. And they often also are expensive as well. Instead, I'd rather you have smaller amounts of the real thing. The real thing. Could be chocolate. Let's stick with a small amount instead of carob. Now, for people who love carob, by all means, please have them. I would still say the fat content is still quite high. Now, if you're inclined to have the real thing, I'll be even happier. And this is something that you can tell your friends and families. Let's let them know, look, these diabetic foods, so to speak, aren't really going to benefit you or their wallets. So they might as well spend the money somewhere else, I reckon. All right, let's dive into managing portions. So often when you are faced with few healthy choices or fewer healthy choices, then limiting portions can help to contain the damage, if you like. So Now here we've got some pictures. We're looking at downsizing of portions. I've got, I know there's a sea of numbers, but let me walk them through. So we have Christmas cake here in 3 different slices. There's fat and carbohydrate, but more importantly, let's focus on the middle column here, kJ for kilojoules. So that looks at the amount of calories, if you like. So I'll give you a couple of numbers to contextualize things for us. So let's look at this, the number in the red circle. So we've got 1460. So what does that really mean? So that equates to about the number of kilojoules of a low-fat, high-fiber meal that we would recommend people living with diabetes to have on a regular basis. Now, this is a thick slice of Christmas cake, and you would have just done that in exchange for a meal. Now, if you were to go to the thinner slice, which is 2 numbers up to where you see 730. Now, I'll give you another number to reference. Now, 600 kilojoules often is a number floating in the literature that describes the calorie or energy content of a healthy snack. So 600's in about the supposed ballpark that we can aim for. So if you want a thin slice, it's not too far away from that as a snack. We recognize that there's still fat and carbs, but if Christmas cake needs to be part of your selection, then we encourage the smaller one, the thinner slice. Okay, I've just been reminded of time, so let's see if I can whip it up a little bit. So we've got candy cane, so easy to just pinch one over, and again, 1340 for the giant one is one meal. I'd rather you pick something small and just be happy with that. Kilojoules in some common festive foods. So I've got mince pie and apple. I know it's not terribly fair to compare the two, but if you just look at, again, the energy difference, you're looking at almost 600. Again, one snack difference. I'm thinking the mince pie is often not very filling as well, let alone the fat content that comes with it. It's also got more carbohydrate as well. So if mince pies were to become a more regular occurrence, it's very easy to put on that weight just by the difference in the calories. We have here cheese and bickies on the left-hand side, and we have low-fat hummus and veggie sticks. Again, you can see that a big differential in the calorie or energy content here, and the fat content as well. The carbohydrates about the same. We have Christmas pudding and brandy custard. We've also got custard and fruit salad on the right-hand side. So you can see that by going with something still sweet, like the custard and fruit salad, you've saved yourself a meal worth of kilojoules and almost 12 grams of fat. Carbohydrate is also quite different. So I'm also aware of some people managing diabetes who may be using tablets or insulin, that could also be a consideration when it comes to choosing between the two. Now that's food. Let's look at drinks. So alcohol is a common factor when it comes to festive celebrations. It's also important to remember the effects that alcohol can have on your diabetes and overall health. Certainly too much alcohol can impact your diabetes management around gaining weight. It can also then become more difficult to manage your diabetes as a result. Of course, there are short-term and longer-term effects of alcohol. Too much alcohol can also increase the risk of developing complications as well by putting on weight, can raise triglycerides, which is a type of blood fats, and also increases blood pressure as well. So all those things are not useful. We recognize that, but with that in mind, let's look at standard drinks, which is how alcohol content is defined. So all these examples here contain 10 grams of alcohol, which is the one standard drink. So the advice, I'm not going to go through all the amounts, but the advice we give for alcohol and diabetes is basically, if you can drive safely, it's about right for managing diabetes. So we've got here no more than 2 standard drinks a day for men and women. This is based on the current alcohol guidelines, and no more than 4 standard drinks in one sitting or on one occasion. We encourage some alcohol-free days per week, so I would interpret that as at least a couple of days a week without alcohol if possible. Now in real life, let's look at some portions and amounts that we are often served. So on the left-hand side, before I go to the wine. On the left-hand side, we have a meaty pot that's a low alcohol beer. So that's not quite one standard drink. That's probably the exception to the rule. Less than one standard drink per amount or per glass, if you like. Now, by the time you get to the can and the stubby of full-strength beer, you're looking at about 1.5 standard drinks. When you go to the wine glass, we've got a flute here. It would also work quite nicely with a regular glass of table wine that is filled closer to the top of the glass. You're looking at 1.5, if not 2 standard drinks. Now, if they're also pre-mixed drinks on the most right-hand side, then they would also contain more standard drinks, but also potentially more added sugar as well. Now, my glass at home can fit 200 mils or more quite easily. I have a few glasses at home, different sizes. So you can check out how big is your glass. Alcohol also. Now let's look at some effects of alcohol on diabetes. Jumped ahead of myself a little bit here. So what can alcohol do? Alcohol can cause hypos or delayed hypos, certainly often hours, not minutes, but hours after consumption. So whether to counteract these hypos that could happen, what some people do is they may consider reducing insulin or medications, or they might eat more carbohydrate. Now, I prefer people not to just do it off your bat. Before we get to Christmas, let's discuss this with your diabetes team. Now, whether you have an appointment coming up, or maybe you can email or call your diabetes team and say, okay, I'm planning on having some alcohol. What can I do to help manage it, to avoid these hypos that could happen? Of course, depending on the amount of alcohol, not everyone who drinks alcohol would be affected through their blood glucose levels, lower blood glucose levels. So it's best to check with your team. Now, another aspect that we haven't really touched on is that alcohol, if consumed in excess, because alcohol also contains kilojoules calories, it can also put on extra weight. And because alcohol comes so easily, and when we have parties and functions, people seldom just have the one standard drink. It is often very easy to put on the weight from alcohol alone. So what are some strategies that we can do to manage alcohol and diabetes? We've got some suggestions here. Could be using low joule mixers like Diet Cola, sipping slowly. Alternate alcoholic beverages with non-alcoholic ones. So it could be soda water, Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi, and then a glass of wine, and then alter the order as opposed to beer, wine, beer. We encourage people also to eat carbohydrate containing food when drinking alcohol as well. And that can also help to slow down how quickly alcohol goes down. So that's food and drink in a nutshell. Let's go on now to staying active in the festive season. Now, I have another raise hand function here, so I'd like to know from people if you can get your hands ready. Raise if you do that. How many people in our midst actually proactively plan to be more physically active, or at least to stay physically active over the festive season? I see a lot of hands. Ooh, I see a lot of hands. I love you guys. Ooh, look at that. I can see the numbers going up. That's why I'm quite excited. We're looking at, ooh, I'm trying to work out in my head. My maths is not that good. 40% of people listening. Jess is nodding her head, so I reckon my maths is on course tonight. 40% of people actually proactively plan to stay active. Good on you. Good on you, folks. Well done. Now, the reason why we've put in staying active in the festive season is because staying active actually helps to manage your diabetes. It gives you another edge and another element to help manage your diabetes well. So, staying active can help. A couple of things, 3 things. In the most immediate sense, it can help to manage your blood glucose levels. So certainly if you have overindulged in the meal, then doing some physical activity afterwards can already help to keep those levels from elevating too high. So that can be very helpful. Often in times when it's festive seasons, because the parties are happening, people may also fall off the wagon and have less time to be physically active. So I encourage you to be proactive when it comes to being physically active. In a slightly longer term, then when I'm less physically active, then my weight creeps up quite quickly. So I am kept honest in that regard as well. So being physically active, even somewhat, can help to manage your weight a little easier, better through this festive season. And in the longer term, we're also looking at managing blood pressure, cholesterol, and overall health as well. Sleeping better, stress relief, amongst a few things when people stay active. So we encourage people through this time, over this time, to have time to be physically active for overall health. Now, how then can we stay active? So what are some examples? Potentially, now we've got some here. It could be exercising or being active before work or in your lunch break if you have a function on after work. So it could be that you may go for a lunch walk and go and buy something from the shops and use that as an excuse to have a break and add a few steps in. Could be walking to your function, or if you're catching public transport, perhaps coming off the tram or the bus or the train, a stop or two before that, and walk with your friends and colleagues as well to make activity more enjoyable. It's about enjoyment. When you're at the function, maybe talk while standing rather than sitting, and make all those opportunities, especially in this season of the year as well. It's so enjoyable. And also include activity in a function where possible. Now I've got barefoot bowling. So if your function allows for those things to be pre-planned, lovely. Now, of course, if you turn up to a function where there's no barefoot bowling or pre-planned activities, you can certainly create your own. So whether it's a bit of cricket, maybe coming cricket season, have some fun. Not just physical health, we also encourage people to stay emotionally healthy. Now we know that through this time, Christmas is not always an easy time for everyone to be happy. We know there are people who have more difficult times over this period. So it is important and useful to look after your emotional health, emotional health. Okay, so certainly if family and friends make it difficult for us, then it can also trigger the symptoms of anxiety or depression. It doesn't mean you have clinical anxiety or depression, but you can certainly feel it, and it's not useful. So whether it's arranging to spend some time with people, now we're talking people who nurture you, not people who drain you, but pre-plan that. Certainly if you're feeling lonely, avoid drinking or eating too much, because it's also easy to emotionally eat and also lose track of how much and what you're eating or drinking. Now I've got a few phone numbers here that are really, really useful. So for people who are doing it tough out there, whether you're tuning in tonight or you know of people who are going through a tough time, Lifeline and suicide callback services are extremely helpful. All right, 24/7 services, different types of linkages, whether it's phone or online chats, counseling. All right, they're all available, and they're all prompt, confidential as well. Kids Helpline for young people between the age of 5 and 25. Love it. Their tagline is, let me read this: anytime, any reason. Love it. Other useful numbers, we have Beyond Blue. So they have phone, web chats, email, and they respond within 24 hours, and also online forums. They also have a great bank of resources they can tap into as well, whether it's for yourself or someone you know. Finally, Men's Line. For boys, we find it hard to talk, then Men's Line specialize in that as well. Again, 24/7 phone and phone service. They have online and video chats, and also non-urgent callbacks as well between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. So let's use those resources. So to start summing up, I've been told 2 minutes left. Top 10 tips to stay healthy over the festive season. So I'll just run through them very, very quickly as a summary. Stay active, get enough sleep, go easy on the booze, be careful with high kilojoule snacks, be careful with your portions. If you use medications, particularly insulin, if you're varying your doses, dose for your carbs. And this is where diabetes team comes in. And number 7, be kind to yourself. Take a moment, breathe in, Be kind to yourself. Maintain your diabetes routine where possible, where feasible. Surround yourself, number 9, with family and friends whom you enjoy where possible. On Christmas Day, we know that it's not always easy. And finally, enjoy Christmas Day. What happens if I do gain weight over this festive season? It's not the end of the world. This is where your team comes in. Your accredited practicing dietitian is there to provide you support and motivation through this time. You can reach them through the website or the 1800 number. You can also contact your local community health service if you don't already have a diabetes team at your disposal. Certainly, the extra weight can affect your blood glucose levels, so we encourage a review with your diabetes team. Diabetes Victoria have services over the festive season as well. So number 1, we have the diabetes helpline, and they stay open. Whoops, my dots got jumbled up. Let's start again. All of our Diabetes Victoria offices, which includes our on-call service. Now, the on-call service gives you access to dietitians, diabetes educators, and advocacy officers, my lovely colleagues. Give them a call. We do close on December 21 at 5 p.m. and we reopen on January the 2nd. But the helpline stays open during these dates and these times. So to sum it all up, establish healthy expectations according to your priorities. Have more healthier foods or have less healthy foods. Smaller portions help, and I believe they help a lot. Stay active and stay happy to enjoy the festive season. And please call for help if you feel the need. There are lots of resources out there, and we would be more than happy to either link you up or to help you and support you through this time, whatever you may need. And so we hope that you have a Merry Christmas and a happy New Year. So this question time now. I've got a few questions here. So we've themed them, so let's see whether we can answer them better. Is Scotch, in no particular order, is Scotch better than wine? Well, Scotch is your hard liquor. So if I count and I visualize in standard drinks, 30 mils of Scotch equates to 100 mils to 120 mils of table wine. So if you're the type who loves quality 30 mils, I'm thinking quality, smaller volume, go for Scotch. If you like wine, 120 mils, 120 mils, they're equivalent. Now, we can say that red wine contains the antioxidants, but I'm certainly not one to go, you know what, there is red wine that contains antioxidants, go for red wine. I wouldn't depend on red wine to provide the antioxidants. Actually, I'll depend on the vegetables and the fruit. So for this person asking about Scotch and wine, you take your pick. As long as you can keep it within the 2 standard drinks, lovely. All right. If we eat early dinner around 7 o'clock and stay up late, shall we eat a late snack? You can, depending on how much dinner you eat. Certainly, you can have a small, healthier snack where possible. I'm assuming that you're talking about on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve or Boxing Day here. What should be the meal gap between dinner and breakfast? Ooh. Well, I guess it depends on your body. Everyone's body clock is a little bit different. It also depends on what foods you eat and drink as well. So I would say that as a regular breakfast, typically, and again, it varies widely, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock is a common breakfast time for the people I meet. And dinner can start as early as 5. I know some people start at 4:30. 5 o'clock is starting to get common, 6, 7, and potentially 8 o'clock. So you can see that there's already quite a time gap. Now, depending on people and potentially the type of medications you have, at least for diabetes. Now, for some medication regimens, you may need a snack. So let's work with that. Now, there are also people who have a bigger appetite. I'm kind of a 3 square meal with afternoon tea type of guy. That does me quite nicely. Morning tea doesn't make me happier. If I eat morning tea, I find that I put on weight because I don't need that. Afternoon tea, I know that I do need, so I'm very deliberate with afternoon tea. Supper is optional for me as well. So I hope that I answered that question, but certainly I would use your hunger signals, and again, practice mindful eating, slower eating, to avoid eating in excess of what your body needs. Is packet custard you make with milk okay to eat? Absolutely. Absolutely. Is too much meat not good? This is where I would go, is it a red or a white meat? So there is an amount of red meat that is encouraged. I think it's about 450 grams a week. That's to balance up with, yes, we need red meat for iron because it's richer in iron. At the same time, it can be linked to a higher cancer risk of some types of cancer as well. So 450 grams, we're talking red meat here. So I'm thinking about beef, lamb, particularly these meats. For white meats, you can have a couple of serves. So I'm looking at the palm of my hand, not the fingers. So that's one serve. So if you want the whole palm with fingers, that portion for the day, not a problem. Not a problem at all. And what's my viewpoint on plant-based whole foods diets as a way to manage or reverse type 2 diabetes? Well, there's a few questions in that question. Many roads, let's phrase it this way. I'll phrase it this way. Many roads lead to Rome. For some people, also, I'll start again too. Managing and reversing type 2 diabetes are two different things. So managing type 2 diabetes is a feasible thing that the population can do, whether the person does a plant-based whole food aspect or not. It can be done. You just have to be very deliberate with not just the plant-based whole foods, but also balancing all the nutrients. I'm thinking, just like we were answering the meat question just then, if someone has plant-based foods only, then my first thought as a dietitian is I want to make sure that your iron and your zinc and the like nutrients are enough through other foods that you eat. So this is where seeing a dietitian can be really helpful. So we exist to help you achieve your goals, and your goal could be to have a plant-based whole food approach, eating approach, and we can certainly highlight some foods that can cover some of the common deficits that can happen through that approach. Now, with reversing type 2 diabetes, it's probably a different kettle of fish. Now, we're looking at diabetes being a condition that gets worse with time. So I know that some people may have reversed their diabetes because their baseline compared to how they're managing it now is quite different. So if someone has extremely unhealthy lifestyle choices as a baseline, and by making lots of changes, I believe that there is possibly room to reverse type 2 diabetes. My question is, for how long? So that person may have reversed it for 1 year, 2 years, 3, 5, 10 years, who knows? But there's no guarantee that this person who reversed type 2 diabetes this year or next year would be free of diabetes for the rest of their life. They would still need to monitor as well. So I encourage you to check. Let's see. Is it important to eat small meals often, or is it okay to eat when you're hungry? Well, this probably is actually the same question. Read your appetite. I have a colleague who is hungry every 2 hours, but by the same means, she doesn't and she can't eat too much. So let's work with your body. As long as you're not exceeding the amount, and your body weight often is a good indicator on how you're traveling as well. So be confident with that and monitor and see how you and your body respond. Can you explain why we need carbs after treating a hypo? I can't get my head around it. Well, when people have a hypo or under target blood glucose levels, then that means that there's not enough glucose in the blood. So it's got to come from somewhere, and that's where the carbs come in. So we consume carbs, but also fast digesting or high GI carbs to bring the blood glucose levels up, to restore them. Now, because carbohydrate is usually stored in the liver as well as in the muscles. Now, the muscle carbohydrate will be used up very quickly, and often the liver stores, I call that my pantry, my carbohydrate pantry, is often drained. And that's where the extra carbs will come in, because then I can refill my pantry and not be subject to another hypo, because it is actually, the person will be having a high risk of having another hypo after the first hypo. So it's really important to have not just hypos to treat carbohydrate. Let me try again. To treat your hypo, but also to restore those glucose stores as well. I hope that I've answered everyone's questions to your satisfaction. If we haven't, then we apologize. A couple of places, so you can give us a call on the helpline if we can provide more general advice on 1300 136 588. Now, for more individual cases and advice, we encourage you to connect back with your diabetes team, because our capacity is only able to provide you with general information. But we're not a clinical service, and we certainly don't want to go out of our way. We don't want to contradict what your diabetes team wants. So end of the day, we exist to support what your diabetes team is asking you to do. So I'll just wrap up here. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope that you've gotten something useful for this festive season. Now, before you log off, we would really love you to fill in the survey. So this is what it's going to look like. Once we hang up on our end, so you can take your hands off the mouse and just let us do what we do here. So what Jess will close our webinar officially, and you will see the screen, because I don't want you to look at the screen and say, that's weird. I'll close that now. This is the actual screen that's going to take you to our survey. So you see the box, the blue box on the bottom left, it says continue. Click continue, and it will take you to that survey. So we would love to hear how we did tonight, how whether we catered to your needs, or we fell short of the mark. But more importantly, if you have future topics or other topics that you'd like us to cover in future, please let us know, because we love to hear from you. There's nothing like knowing what you want us to address, and we will endeavor to cover those topics in future webinars. So once again, we thank you for dialing in tonight, and we hope that you all have a lovely, happy, joyful festive season, and celebrate your festivals, festivities, Christmas or otherwise. And we look forward to linking up with you very soon in the future. Take care and good night.